Chapter 1591. Yuan and Zenshin hurriedly replied, please don't be so polite, Elder Long. Technically speaking, you're a senior of mine. Back when I first became a Soul Master, you were already a household name all throughout the continent. Long Ye smiled, and said, it's Shrek Academy's honor to have the support of the Yuan family. Now then, Zhang please begin. We'll all follow your lead. Wu Zhang replied, all right, please come with me, everyone. He rose up into the air as he spoke, then flew toward the western side of the Sea God's Lake. Tang Wolin and the others also followed closely behind him. Following the reawakening of the Tree of Life, the deathly aura of the Sea God's Lake had already vanished. The water in the lake was still very clear, but signs of life were beginning to appear. There was currently no plan to rebuild the Sea God's Island, as that would have to wait until after the reconstruction of Shrek Academy. The Tree of Life had told Tang Wolin that at the very least, it had to grow out of the surface of the lake first before the reconstruction of the Sea God's Island could even be considered. Shrek Academy had only just begun its rebuild, and there was a lot of work left to be done. The Sea God's Lake was quite massive, but at their speed, they were still able to reach their destination quite quickly. In the distance, a vortex with a diameter of roughly 30 meters emerged before everyone's eyes. The vortex was perfectly round, and the water within it wasn't flowing very quickly, but one could sense that it was very deep just by looking at it. The entire group was comprised of powerful soul masters, so they were all able to clearly sense the powerful spatial fluctuations within the vortex. All of the limit Douluo surrounded the vortex, while Wu Zhang cast his gaze toward Tang Wolin. A series of soul rings emerged around Tang Wolin's body, and his fifth greenish golden soul ring began to glow, while his eyes also turned green. Moments later, he gave Wu Zhang a nod to indicate that he had established a connection with the Tree of Life. Wu Zhang didn't hesitate any longer as he extended a respectful bow toward the vortex, then carefully raised his hands to reveal an extremely peculiar-looking rock. The rock was entirely purplish black in color, and its surface was extremely bumpy and uneven. Furthermore, there were beams of purple light emanating from the pits and bumps on its surface. The purple light was initially restricted to within a diameter of around half a foot, but as soon as Wu Zhang removed the color speed from the top of the rock, the purple light immediately flourished through the surrounding area. Wu Zhang was situated closest to the rock, and a pained look immediately appeared on his face. The purple light was imbued with the purest of destructive auras, and it was as if this aura were threatening to devour the entire world. Tang Wolin wore a serious expression, as did the six limit Douluos, and all of them sprang into action at once, releasing their enormous soul power to form a light barrier that contained all of the destructive energy. The amount of destructive energy within this small rock exceeded even that of the radiation previously in the Sea God's Lake, and it was far purer as well. Wu Zhang tossed the rock down into the vortex below, and as soon as the rock entered the water, the entire vortex was instantly tainted a purplish black color. Wu Zhang quickly retreated to join the circle formed by the 7 other people present, following which Long Ye thrust her wizened palms forward, and her wrinkly hands suddenly turned as fair and smooth as jade as she made a ripping motion. A spatial rift was instantly torn open, and as soon as it appeared, it began to devour everything around it in a frenzy. At the same time, the other 5 limit Douluos also sprang into action. Golden light began to radiate from their bodies, and that wasn't just their soul power, but also their enormous spiritual power. The 5 limit Douluos grabbed onto the sides of the spatial rift, then tore it open even further to form a circular shape. One had to realize that the edges of spatial rifts were able to slice through all things, so it definitely required more than just normal power to tear it open like this. The destructive aura that had just surged into the water was instantly devoured and connected with the spatial rift. Tang Wolin stepped forward and arrived directly above the rift, then immediately released his suit of freeware battle armor. The wings on his back spread open to allow him to maintain his altitude as he hovered above the rift, and his greenish golden soul ring began to glow with scintillating radiance. A beam of green light rose up into the air from the center of the Sea God's Lake, traveling in a beautiful parabolic arc through the air before projecting onto his body with unerring accuracy, illuminating him into a greenish golden color. The gentle greenish golden light was filled with an extremely rich aura of life, creating a stark contrast with the destructive aura in that rock. The polar opposites of life and destruction clashed amid a resounding boom, but the sound was caught somewhere between reality and illusion, and it was audible only to the 8 people present. Everyone gave a muffled groan as their auras diminished, and the spatial rift that had just been torn open suddenly faltered. A beam of silver light then erupted out of the vortex down below, following which an authoritative voice rang out. The conclusion of all life is destruction, while destruction is the beginning of all creation. They act as one another's starting points and conclusions, and they form the cause of this small world. Converge, life and destruction, create this new world. Green, purple, and silver light surged forth in unison, converging toward the spatial rift that had just been torn open. All of a sudden, the entire spatial rift began to ripple violently, and everyone injected their soul power into the rift with all their might. Enormous waves were suddenly swept up within the Sea God's Lake, and the vortex in the lake also began to rotate at a rapid speed. One had to realize that a small plane was currently being created, and the creation of every plane had a subtle impact on the entire world. To put it in simpler terms, they were currently creating a small plane similar to the myriad beast plane. Aside from planes that were naturally formed within space, only gods could create new planes, and there was no god present. Not even the Tree of Life was a godly being. As such, they had to use the clash between life and destruction to generate a tiny spark of creation, then use that to form this small world. This could only be achieved by the Tree of Life, while Tang Wolin and the others were required to provide the energy required to bring the small world into existence. If they were to solely rely on the Tree of Life to complete this process, then it would undoubtedly overexert the life energy it had just recovered. At a time like this, the disparity in everyone's powers was quickly put on display. The 6 limit Douluo all wore serious expressions, but they weren't showing much signs of strain. However, Tang Wolin was beginning to struggle. He had only just become a hyper Douluo, and his foundation was definitely very solid, but he was tasked with the transference of life energy, and that was the most taxing role. He felt as if that spatial rift were like a bottomless hole that was constantly devouring his soul power, and he was quickly struck by a sense of feebleness. Thankfully, he was able to hold everything together with the support of his enormous bloodline power. Chapter 1592. A massive purple flower bloomed behind him, and devouring heaven and earth was unleashed to replenish his soul power. What was quite surprising to Tang Wolin was that Wu Zhang was also managing to keep up. It was clear that he was no ordinary hyper Douluo, and it was very remarkable that he was able to progress so quickly in his cultivation despite how busy he was. Time slowly passed by, and the green and purple lights gradually faded, while the spatial rift slowly combined as one with the vortex. Specks of dazzling starlight appeared within the vortex, and the entire space began to stabilize, while the rate at which it was devouring energy slowed down. A speck of white light began to emerge, and the entire vortex transformed into a lengthy passageway that seemed to lead infinitely into the distance with no end in sight. Everyone had already expended over half of their soul power at this point, and they all heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Long Ye gave Wu Zhang a nod, and Wu Zhang immediately extended his 2 hands forward. At the same time, specks of light appeared all over his body as a suit of pristine white battle armor was released. Beautiful blue patterns emerged over the entire suit of battle armor, and a pair of wings spread open on his back, accentuating his regal and handsome features. Looking at Wu Zhang, Tang Wolin was suddenly taken back to the moment when Wu Zhang had suddenly appeared at the entrance of the academy and scared away that group of megapilots. Wu Zhang was always going to be Tang Wolin's idol, that had never changed, even as Tang Wolin had gradually caught up to Wu Zhang's cultivation rank. That memory from back then was simply branded too deep into his mind. Right at this moment, 7 streaks of light erupted from Wu Zhang's body, and each streak of light corresponded with the color of the rainbow. These 7 streaks of light then transformed into balls of light that hovered in midair, following which Tang Wolin heard a voice that he had never wanted to hear again in his life. Cuckoo, I didn't think you'd manage to organize everything so quickly. I'm quite impressed. Wu Zhang's expression seemed to have become even colder, and even Long Ye and Yoli's expressions had become slightly strained, while Tang Wolin's face had paled slightly. What's with this reaction? Do you not welcome us? Long Ye forced a smile on her own face, and said, I pay my respects to my 7 seniors. The 7 balls of light transformed into 7 figures that frequently featured in the nightmares of all of the inner court disciples of Shrek Academy. They were Old Demon Scourge, Old Demon Engulfment, Old Demon Hatred, Old Demon Nightmare, Old Demon Desire, Old Demon Sloth, and Old Demon Greed. Old Demon Greed wore a benevolent smile as he said, I heard you're already the Sea God's Pavilion Master. Little Wolin, I must congratulate you, as expected of someone trained by me. Bullshit. What does this have to do with you? I was the one who saw the potential in him first. Old Demon Scourge immediately countered. What a load of crap. How could you possibly be where he is today without my trial of boundless desire? Oh, you're no longer a virgin, little Wolin. Who took your first time? I'm very curious. Was it the little girl from the vision you experienced, or have you moved on to a new romantic interest? If Tang Wuolin had a choice, he really wanted to flee the scene. No matter how good his mental state was, he felt as if he were constantly on the verge of a mental breakdown in the face of these 7 old demons. The traumatic memories from their training were simply unforgettable. Ah, you're little Yayu, right? You're so old now, but your aura and that look in your eyes haven't changed at all. Let me see, you married that guy, right? What was his name again? The one that went on to become the Sea God's Pavilion Master, right? But if I recall correctly, you experienced a vision with someone else during your trial of boundless desire. The strain in Long Yayu's expression became even more pronounced upon hearing this, and she immediately urged, ahem, the small world has already been created. Please move in right away, seniors. Tang Wuolin looked up into the sky to repress his own laughter, while Wu Zhangkong looked away and pretended as if he hadn't heard anything. Little Zhangkong had such a sad past. Old Demon Desire was about to continue when she was dragged aside by Old Demon Scourge. All right, let's go now. Haven't you heard the saying that the one who knows the most will die the quickest? We're finally getting a new home. I still want to live for a few more years. Old Demon Greed chuckled as he swept a hand through the air, then flew toward the spatial passageway, followed closely by the 6 other old demons. Tang Wuolin heaved a sigh of relief at the sight of their departure, while Long Yayu was cracking her knuckles as she aimed a vicious glare at Wu Zhangkong. After all, this was his idea. While Wu Zhangkong was accompanying students to the demonic island, he expressed the issue of Shrek Academy's lack of teaching staff to the 7 old demons and asked if they had any solutions. Upon hearing that the Tree of Life had been revived, the 7 old demons had immediately hatched a plan. They could only live in places where life and destruction intertwined, so a new home could be created for them as long as those conditions could be replicated. Wu Zhangkong raised the idea to Tang Wuolin, who then made an inquiry toward the Tree of Life. After confirming that this was indeed a viable option, the 7 old demons were invited to the academy. A small plane was opened, and the core of destruction on the demonic island was balanced by the rich life energy of the Tree of Life to maintain the small plane. Thus, the 7 old demons were able to reside in the Sea God's Lake. Furthermore, this independent small plane was extremely useful for Shrek Academy. It could be used as a sanctuary, while also acting as the training base for the 7 old demons. This was undoubtedly going to be extremely beneficial for the academy's development. Of course, just like it had been in the past, only inner court disciples who had undergone examination had the right to receive this training. All of a sudden, Old Demon Greed returned amid a flash of light. Little Wuolin, we're very happy to be able to return to the academy, and as a gesture of gratitude, we've decided to let you name this small plane as the Sea God's Pavilion Master. Tang Wuolin folded slightly before suggesting, how about we still call it the demonic island? Old Demon Greed's face immediately fell. Who are you calling demons? We're now integral parts of the academy. How about we call it the 7 Saint Paradise? I think that's quite a good name. All right, seeing as you've agreed, then it's settled. We'll call it the 7 Saint Paradise. After that, Old Demon Greed disappeared amid another flash of light, leaving Tang Wuolin to look on in a flabbergasted manner. Hadn't he been given the naming rights? Having left the demonic island so long ago, he had already somewhat forgotten how tricky the old demons were. 7 Saint Paradise? More like 7 Demon Abyss. However, Tang Wuolin had no intention of going against their wishes. Those old demons knew far too many secrets. Furthermore, they really were integral parts of the academy. It was just that no one liked them. Long Yayu turned to the other limit Douluo present, and said, thank you for your help, everyone. You can all go now. Yali and I will assist the 7 seniors in consolidating the plane. Zhang Xin wore a joyful smile as he said, don't worry, Elder Long, we didn't hear anything. Long Yayu's smile immediately faded. Get out of here. Haha. Zhang Xin couldn't help but burst into laughter as he departed. He wouldn't dare to provoke Long Yayu like this on his own, but he was far more confident with Cao Daja present as well. Consolidating a small plane wasn't an easy task, but thankfully, they had the assistance of the Tree of Life, which would at least ensure that the small plane wouldn't be damaged. During the subsequent period of time, the entire Shrek Academy began to busy itself with making preparations for enrollment day. The first round of selection had already passed, and those who passed that round of selection would be eligible to move on to the second round, and that round of selection would decide how many students would be accepted into Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy's mantra was that they only accepted monsters and no ordinary people. If there were only a single monster among all of the applicants, then they would only take a single student. Quality above quantity was the integral concept. The traditions of Shrek Academy couldn't be shaken no matter what. This was the conclusion Tang Wuolin had reached during his discussion with Elder Long, Yali, Wu Zhangkong, and the other high-ranking members of the academy. Chapter 1593. 1 month later. What? Tang Wuolin was taking a rare break, enjoying some tea with Zhang Xin beside the Sea God's Lake, when he suddenly received a call from Shi. Zhang Xin took a sip of his tea as he cast his gaze toward Tang Wuolin, whose brows had suddenly become tightly furrowed. After ending the call, Tang Wuolin said in a grim voice, the Spirit Pagoda's Spirit Academy has announced its enrollment date to be on the same day as ours. Zhang Xin raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. I was wondering why they'd been so quiet recently. They're trying to shake the foundation of our Shrek Academy by doing this. What was the foundation of an academy? It wasn't the facilities and teaching resources. It wasn't even the teachers. Instead, it was the students. Without a sufficient number of good students, an academy wouldn't be able to develop in a meaningful way. Shrek Academy had become the #1 academy on the continent as the efforts from countless generations of people had proven that the academy was the best place to nurture exceptional soul masters. As a result, more outstanding young talents flocked to the academy each year, and a positive reinforcement loop was formed, thereby granting Shrek Academy the influence that it went on to attain. The glory of Shrek Academy had been carried on the shoulders of generations of Shrek Academy students, particularly Shrek's 7 monsters. In the wake of the academy's destruction and the deaths of so many exceptional teachers, it was imperative for this first enrollment of the rebuilt Shrek Academy to go well. Shrek Academy's enrollment criteria was very rigorous to begin with. If it couldn't take in enough students, then the academy would be dealt a massive blow. If that were to happen, the Spirit Pagoda would be able to claim that the #1 academy on the continent had fallen from its lofty pedestal. This was what Tang Wuolin was most worried about. The sinister intent behind the Spirit Pagoda's decision to set their enrollment date on the same day as Shrek Academy was plain to see. In terms of high-end power, Shrek Academy wasn't inferior to the Spirit Pagoda. However, enrollment wasn't a battle, and in terms of resources, the rebuilt Shrek Academy couldn't compare with the Spirit Pagoda, particularly when it came to wealth and soul spirits. The Spirit Pagoda is most likely going to steal students from us at all costs. Tang Wuolin said with furrowed brows. Zhang Xin nodded in response. I would do the same thing if I were Kaiangi Dongfang. Only by severing the foundation of Shrek Academy will we be able to create a negative reinforcement loop that will herald the downfall of our academy. If we're unable to enroll new students in the next few years, then the weight of controversy will pile up against us, and even the academy supporters will begin to have their doubts. This is going to be a stern trial for you, Wuolin. You have to be prepared. Tang Wuolin nodded with a grim expression. What was the focus when it came to competing for students? Was it wealth and resources, the benefits they could offer the students, or was it something else? What should he do? Tang Wuolin was at a complete loss. The Spirit Pagoda was definitely well prepared. The temporary Sea God's Pavilion of Shrek Academy had been constructed on a peaceful part of the Sea God's Lake bank. This plot of land was protruding slightly into the Sea God's Lake like a small island. In order to commemorate the past Sea God's Pavilion, the entire building was constructed from wood, and only the elders of the Sea God's Pavilion were granted entry. Holy Spirit Douluo Yali and Light Dark Douluo Long Yayu both lived there, and there were currently 12 members in the Sea God's Pavilion, comprised of Elder Long, Yali, Shrek 7 monsters, Wu Zhangkong, Lan Muzi, and Tang Yiming. The spacious conference hall had been constructed to match the construction style of the old Sea God's Pavilion as much as possible, and all of the seats around the long table were currently filled. Tang Wuolin sat on the main seat with Yali and Elder Long on either side of him. The most important occasion in Shrek Academy was undoubtedly Sea God's Pavilion conference, and Tang Wuolin was holding one today for only one objective: to discuss how they were going to compete with the Spirit Pagoda in the enrollment battle. The Spirit Academy is situated right beside the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, and the Academy's area is even larger than ours. According to the information we've gathered, Spirit Academy has 2 branches, the Soul Master Academy and the Mecha Academy. Their enrollment is on the same date as ours, and they haven't announced what they're going to do, but it's clear that they're going to try and target us in many ways. The Spirit Pagoda is extremely wealthy, particularly after the creation of the Myriad Beast platform, so we won't win in a competition of resources. Does anyone have any good ideas for how we can compete against them? The current Spirit Academy was still shrouded in mystery. There was only a month left until the enrollment date, but they still hadn't released their enrollment conditions. The main issue was that no one knew anything about the Academy, nor what it planned to do on enrollment day. However, it was clear that the Academy was going to be targeting Shrek Academy. Lan Muzi's brows were tightly furrowed as he said, this is a very troubling issue. I'm worried that the Spirit Pagoda will employ tactics tactics such as granting students soul spirits or even opportunities to enter the spirit ascension plane and myriad beast plane as an unfair advantage over us. In terms of soul spirits, they hold the absolute advantage, and soul spirits are unexpendable to all soul masters. Ever since the creation of artificial black soul spirits, the Spirit Pagoda has been on a meteoric rise, and many powers have become subsidiaries to them. Even major organizations like the Mecha Pilot Association have become very close with the Spirit Pagoda, so we're definitely in for a stern battle. Most of our alumni will be willing to send their children to our academy, but if the benefits offered by the Spirit Pagoda are too alluring, then it'll be very difficult to say whether they'll be swayed or not. Elder Long said in a grim voice, "We're all aware of this. What we need now is a plan. We need solutions, not a list of problems." Lan Muzi and Tang Yunmeng exchanged a glance, then both shook their heads to indicate that they didn't have any ideas. Meanwhile, Wu Zhangkong was seated in silence with his usual cold expression. Unfortunately, it seems that they had no choice but to admit that Shrek Academy didn't hold any advantages. The past Shrek Academy was the #1 academy on the continent, but even in its heyday, it would have struggled to contend with this new Spirit Academy. It was just that at the time, Shrek Academy was too powerful, and the Spirit Pagoda wouldn't dare to target the academy like this. However, the Spirit Pagoda had clearly thrown all caution to the wind and were going for the jugular. The calm period that had preceded this turned out to be the calm before a lethal storm. If they couldn't find a good solution to this problem, then Shrek Academy's foundation really would be shaken. Zhangkong, you're the out-of-court principal. What do you think of this? Elder Long asked. Wu Zhangkong turned to her and replied, "Theoretically speaking, this is indeed a very difficult issue to face. We're at an absolute disadvantage, and I'm sure the Spirit Pagoda will have a whole host of ways to lure good students to their academy. I can't think of any solutions." Elder Long's expression darkened even further upon hearing this. It seems that this was an impossible problem to resolve. Chapter 1594. However, Wu Zhangkong suddenly continued, and everyone turned their attention back to him again. Just because we can't think of anything doesn't mean there's no solution. I suggest that we should add old Demon Greed as a new member of our Sea Gods Pavilion. With his vast wealth of life experience, perhaps he'll have some unique insights. Everyone's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Of course, no one enjoyed seeing the old demons around, but they had to admit that all of them had benefited immensely from their military training. The 7 old demons were special teachers of Shrek Academy that were a secret to everyone else, and only the more core disciples were able to receive their training. Their small world was already stable, and only a small vortex was visible from the outside to indicate the 7 Saint Paradise's existence, so no one knew what the interior was like. Tang Wolin turned to Long Yeyu, and the latter's brows furrowed tightly as she said, "I really detest those old demons, but at the same time, I have to admit that they've contributed far more to the academy than all of us. Seeing as they've returned, there really should be a spot for them in the Sea Gods Pavilion, but only one. Indeed, all 7 of the old demons deserve to be members of the Sea Gods Pavilion, but if they were accepted, then the Sea Gods Pavilion would soon be tipped on its head." Tang Wolin nodded in response. "I agree. Teacher Wu, please invite Senior Greed to join us." "All right." Wu Zhangkong departed, and a brief period of silence ensued. The situation was very dire, but no one had any good ideas. Shortly thereafter, Wu Zhangkong returned, and old Demon Greed was hovering next to him. The old demon's body appeared to be very substantial, completely unlike a typical soul body. He had a rotund frame with a benevolent smile on his face, and no one would think of him as a demonic being. However, those who were familiar with him knew that he was the leader of the old demons. The 7 old demons were constantly bickering with one another, but anytime something important happened, they would all turn to old Demon Greed for instructions. "Senior Greed." Everyone stood up and paid their respects to old Demon Greed. Old Demon Greed made his way over to Long Yeyu with a warm smile, and said, "Can I sit beside you, little Yue?" Long Yeyu's expression immediately fell. "Do whatever you want." Old Demon Greed continued, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about what happened back then. It was just..." "Shut up." Long Yeyu yelled as spiritual power surged from her body, only to be completely dispelled by a flash of red light released by old Demon Greed. "Haha, all right, I won't say anything." Old Demon Greed chuckled, then took a seat next to Long Yeyu, which had just been vacated for him. "How are things going in the 7 Saint Paradise, Senior Greed?" Tang Wolin asked. "Everything's going very well. The Tree of Life is doing a very good job, and the small world is just as stable as the main world. As long as nothing happens to the Tree of Life, the 7 Saint Paradise will have no issues. On top of that, all of us are thoroughly enjoying everyone's company here." A wry smile appeared on Tang Wolin's face. "I must request you and the other seniors to refrain from harassing the people in the academy." Old Demon Greed replied with a smile. "What do you mean by harass? We're just testing everyone." "All right, I agree to join the Sea Gods Pavilion. Come to think of it, this was my greatest wish back when I was alive. I didn't think it would come true now. Even though this is no longer the same Sea Gods Pavilion of the past, I'm still very happy. Truth be told, if you make me the Pavilion Master, I'll get the academy back to its former glory in no time." As expected of old Demon Greed, he was making no effort to disguise his own greedy nature. Tang Wolin cleared his throat and said, "Senior Greed, the academy has encountered a problem, and we'd like to hear your advice." Thus, he gave a brief summary of the situation surrounding Spirit Academy. After hearing his account, old Demon rolled his eyes and denounced, "You're all a bunch of idiots." Tang Wolin faltered slightly upon hearing this, while Long Yeyu's expression darkened even further, and only Yali managed to maintain her smile as she asked, "Why do you say that, Senior?" Old Demon Greed rolled his eyes and asked, "Let me ask you this, what is Shrek Academy?" Yali replied, "The #1 academy on the continent." Old Demon Greed continued, "What type of people do we teach?" Tang Wolin replied, "Outstanding young soul masters." Old Demon Greed countered, "Wrong, we only teach monsters. We are an academy of monsters." "What is a monster?" "Monsters aren't just prodigies. When required, monsters have to be unreasonable." "Why didn't the Spirit Pagoda dare to found an academy in the past?" "It's because Shrek Academy was too powerful for them to contend with. All of you think that we have to compete with them through conventional means, but since when have monsters followed the rules? Do you think Shrek's 7 monsters is just an empty title?" Tang Wolin felt as if his eyes had been opened to a whole new world after hearing this. Indeed, his thought process had been too orthodox and conventional. Old Demon Greed continued, "The best way to deal with the Spirit Pagoda is to face them head on and spit in their faces." Long Yeyu's lips twitched slightly with amusement, and Tang Wolin's eyes also began to light up. As expected of an old demon, 1 week later, almost all of the Seoul television channels on the entire continent were broadcasting news about Spirit Academy's enrollment, and Spirit Academy had also released a statement. In the statement, it was announced that the academy would be split up into a Soul Master branch and a Mecha Pilot branch. It was going to be situated beside the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, which meant that it was less than 15 kilometers away from Shrek Academy. The Mecha Pilot branch offered courses for white, yellow, purple, and black mechas, and the full term was 12 years. Students would be able to graduate once they became 5th ranked Mecha Pilots or above. There was also a Divine Grade Mecha Academy in the Mecha Pilot branch, and this was a joint venture with the Mecha Pilot Association. All of the teachers in this prestigious academy were 7th ranked Mecha Pilots at the lowest, and there were even 3 Divine Grade Mecha Pilots among them. As for the Soul Master branch, that was split up into a normal academy and an advanced academy. The full term in the normal academy was 12 years, and upon becoming a Soul Ancestor, one could choose to graduate or apply for enrollment in the advanced academy. In the advanced academy, all resources required for the students were provided free of charge, but after graduation, students had to work for the Spirit Pagoda for at least 5 years. All of the soul spirits required by students of the advanced academy would be provided by the Spirit Pagoda, and all of the teachers of the Soul Master branch were Spirit Pagoda Soul Masters, including 12 titled Douluos and 24 Soul Douluo. Entrances to both the Spirit Ascension plane and Myriad Beast plane were going to be set up in the academy, and students could earn points through academic merit for chances to enter the 2 planes. The Myriad Beast plane was only open to students of the Divine Grade Mecha Academy and Advanced Soul Master Academy, and each student would only receive 2 free entries per year. At the same time, scholarships were being offered based on one's powers. Students that exceeded rank 20 in soul power or became 3rd rank Mecha Pilots prior to turning 12 would receive full scholarships and a range of other benefits. Chapter 1595. All students who graduate from Spirit Academy would be prioritized for consideration to work at the Spirit Pagoda, and the first principal of the academy was Kyangyu's Hangting. Kyangyu's Hangting had actually wanted Yu Yuna to take on this role, but ever since that day, Yu Yuna had locked herself into seclusion. Kyangyu's Hangting was desperate to see her, but there was nothing that he could do, and he had even quarreled with his own grandfather, who had thought of this idea. However, Kyangyu Dongfang merely brushed off his concerns, assuring him that engaging in physical relations with Yu Yuna was a massive step in the right direction. She would only be temporarily angry. The most important thing was that she had given herself to Kyangyu's Hangting. At the same time, he now had full trust in Yu Yuna. Kyangyu's Hangting had been made the first principal of Spirit Academy in order to further elevate his status to prepare for when he took over the role of Spirit Pagoda chairman in the future. Spirit Academy had been secretly under construction for a long time, even as far back as during the Joust for a Spouse event. This was the true trump card that the Spirit Pagoda held against Shrek Academy, and it had been prepared to deal Shrek Academy a lethal blow. Regardless of how one looked at it, the Spirit Pagoda held the absolute advantage. Shrek Academy had only just begun its reconstruction, and even with support from many different powers, they simply didn't have many of the core resources required for a soul master's cultivation. Nowadays, one could no longer just travel to the Great Star Dou Forest to obtain soul rings. Soul spirits had become an indispensable part of cultivation. On the surface, the Spirit Pagoda was open to all soul masters, but in reality, the conditions offered by Spirit Academy would significantly reduce the cost of one's cultivation. The temptation was simply far too great for young talents that weren't that well off, just like Tang Wulian in his youth. Furthermore, there was also the Myriad Beast Plane. The Myriad Beast Plane was currently being hailed as the best thing since sliced bread, and it was earning the Spirit Pagoda a massive amount of wealth and influence. As such, even though Shrek Academy had spoiled the Joust for a Spouse event, Kyangy Dongfang wasn't concerned at all. He had been waiting for enrollment day to deal Shrek Academy the heaviest of blows. He was going to crush Shrek Academy with their absolute advantage in resources. The entire Spirit Academy was visible from the top level of the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. The academy was constructed in a pair of hexagonal shapes, and each hexagon contained one of the Soul Master and Mega Pilot branches. Yu Yuna was currently standing in front of her window, casting a solemn gaze down toward the academy. How was Tang Wulian going to face such a challenge? There was no sinister ploy involved. This was the most straightforward of challenges, and that was what made it most difficult to face. This was the most vicious ploy Kyangy Dongfang had up his sleeve. Yu Yuna was slightly concerned, but there was nothing that she could do. She had just regained Kyangy Dongfang's trust by placing Kyangyu's Hangting into that illusion, and everything was progressing in the right direction, so she couldn't afford to do something that would make Kyangy Dongfang doubt her again. The ringtone of her soul communicator sounded, and she looked down at the number on the display, upon which a scornful look appeared on her face. What is it? She asked in a cold voice as she picked up the call. Nana, how is your seclusion going? Staying indoors all the time isn't good for you. The grand opening for our Spirit Academy is coming up in a few days. Would you like to accompany me? Yu Yuna replied, no, don't disrupt my cultivation unless something important comes up. After that, she cut off the call. She was getting quite sick of pretending to be in a relationship with Kyangyu's Hangting, and this gave her an excuse to temporarily avoid him. Kyangyu's Hangting put away his soul communicator with a resigned expression. The blissful memories from that day still struck him with a sense of indescribable excitement, but the price seemed to be a bit heavy. He hadn't seen her for a very long time. His only source of consolation came from the fact that he knew that she had been in the Spirit Pagoda this entire time, but things couldn't just continue like this. She's still unwilling to come out? Kyangy Dongfang asked with a smile. A wry smile appeared on Kyangyu's Hangting's face as he nodded in response. Look at what you've done, grandfather. If you hadn't put me up to this, I wouldn't be in this situation. Kyangy Dongfang chuckled. Foolish boy, can't you see she's just playing hard to get so you'll cherish her more in the future? Nana is a very staunch girl. Do you really think you could have taken her against her will? Don't forget that you're no match for her in battle. Kyangyu's Hangting's expression became even gloomier upon hearing this. I don't understand, grandfather. I'm already working very hard in my cultivation, and I'm not lacking in talent, either. So why is it that the gap between myself and Nana is only widening? Her combat prowess is close to the limit Douluo level. I really don't understand how she did it. Kyangy Dongfang smiled and said, that's not important. What's important is that we can use her to our benefit. Nana is a very smart girl. Do you know why she didn't reject you? In a sense, she's putting on a show for me. She's giving you the cold shoulder to express her displeasure about all of this, but she's still engaged in physical relations with you to tell me through her actions that there's no one else in her heart aside from you. Nana is just as intelligent as she is beautiful. If you can control her, she'll most definitely be your greatest ally. However, it looks like she's more powerful than you, and there's a very good chance that you'll never be able to surpass her. Having said that, as long as she bears the child of the Kyangy family, we'll have her locked firmly in our grasp. Kyangyu's Hangting side, as usual, you're much better at considering the full picture than I am, but I don't think Nana is such a scheming character. Kyangy Dongfang snapped. That's why you can't compare with her. She's far more wily than you think. All right, don't focus all your attention on relationship problems. Enrollment is about to begin, and we have to make sure that nothing goes wrong. I'm going to ensure that Shrek Academy is forever dead and buried. A hint of killing intent surfaced in Kyangy Dongfang's eyes as he spoke. The Spirit Pagoda was in an unprecedented position of power that was completely unshakable. As such, he had to take advantage of this opportunity to completely consolidate the Spirit Pagoda's status, and Spirit Academy was an integral part of this. Once Spirit Academy replaced Shrek Academy as the #1 academy on the continent, the Spirit Pagoda would become a truly insurmountable power. Kyangy Dongfang was the most ambitious chairman in the past several centuries, and he had invested much of the Spirit Pagoda's profits into research and development in soul technology. He knew that with the advancement of soul technology, mechas and other soul weapons were going to continue to take massive forward strides. This was why soul masters were no longer as revered as they had once been, and in this day and age, technology was the key to power. The foundation of the Spirit Pagoda was built on soul spirits, but what if soul technology became so advanced one day that soul spirits were rendered redundant? Would there be any point in soul masters then? However, if you were to grasp the most cutting-edge soul technology, then the Spirit Pagoda would always be the most powerful organization. Tang Wulian had managed to stop a war with the soul technology of the Tang sect, and in the past, most of the Spirit Pagoda's research had been directed towards soul spirits, but ever since artificial black soul spirits had been released, Kyangy Dongfang was already directing more of his attention and resources into other ventures. Chapter 1596. Yes, grandfather, everything is ready to go, and it looks to me like Shrek Academy has accepted its fate. We've received widespread attention through our promotion of the academy, but Shrek Academy hasn't displayed any reactions. I think they're giving up because they know that they can't compete anyway. You may think this is blind overconfidence, but even I can't think of any way for them to turn the tables. In terms of resources, they can't even begin to compare with us. If it weren't for the potential repercussions that could arise, I was planning to announce that our Spirit Pagoda would refuse to provide soul spirits to all students of Shrek Academy. If we do that, I'm sure we'll be able to completely stomp them into the dirt. Kyangy Dongfang cautioned, stop spouting nonsense. That's something that we absolutely cannot do, as it will make us a public enemy to all supporters and sympathizers of Shrek Academy. Having said that, some things can be done in private. Kyangyu's Hangting's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. What are your plans, grandfather? Kyangy Dongfang replied, after enrollment, make a tally of how many students Shrek Academy managed to enroll. I want to know the exact numbers so I can devise a plan to target them. Just because we're not making any public announcements doesn't mean we won't pull any strings in the shadows. We're going to make sure that they're dead and buried once and for all. Kyangyu's Hangting's eyes lit up even further. I understand, grandfather. This was a tranquil and scenic day without a single cloud in sight. This was just an ordinary day for the Douluo continent, but it was a very important day for the Soul Master world. This was the first enrollment day for the reconstructed Shrek Academy, and it was very apparent that Spirit Academy was also holding its enrollment day on the same day as a provocative gesture. The two academies were less than 15 kilometers away from one another, yet they were openly competing with each other. The success of the rebuilt Shrek Academy and whether it could contend with Spirit Academy would hinge on the results of this enrollment day. The benefits offered by Spirit Academy were undoubtedly far more practically alluring, but Shrek Academy had its illustrious history and traditions, so it wasn't completely without chances. During the Joust for a spouse event, the two powers had completely done away with all semblance of pleasantries. Which side was going to come out on top? Early in the morning, all of the major media crews had already flocked to the two academies. All of the media outlets had sent out two crews, one to each academy, in order to facilitate live comparisons. Sure enough, prospective students had already begun lining up in front of the two academies. The media was then greeted by the sight of two massive banners that were unfurled around 100 meters in front of the main entrance of Shrek Academy. The banner on the left read, Spirit Academy, Soul Spirits for Life, and the banner on the right read, Make the Right Choice, all live to read your decision. These banners were accompanied by two massive arrows pointing towards Spirit Academy, and beside the banners were over 30 soul buses bearing the hexagonal emblem of Spirit Academy. This wasn't just provocation anymore. This was a clear threat to all those looking to enroll in Shrek Academy, and it was clear that the gloves were truly off. Two middle-aged men with powerful auras stood under the banners, and they were both clearly powerful soul masters. Good morning, everyone. I am a reporter from the Bright City television station, and as we all know, today is enrollment day for Spirit Academy and Shrek Academy. We've only just arrived at Shrek Academy, and as everyone can see through these banners set up by Spirit Academy, the competition between the two academies is already very fierce. How will the prospective new students choose? Let's interview one right now. The reporter was quite a beauty, and she made her way to the end of the line in front of the main entrance of Shrek Academy to interview a prospective student. All prospective students had to be no more than 12 years of age, so almost all of them were accompanied by their parents. Hi there, why are you applying for Shrek Academy? The reporter asked. The young boy at the end of the line replied in a slightly jittery manner. Of course I'm applying for Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy is the #1 academy on the continent. I really want to go there. The reporter then pointed at the banners in the distance. What do you think of these tactics being employed by Spirit Academy? The young boy hesitated momentarily before turning to his father. His father replied, I think these tactics are very unscrupulous. In my opinion, the most important thing in an academy is its culture, and through these banners, Spirit Academy is displaying a lack of basic decency and respect. Shrek Academy has produced countless exceptional soul masters over the past 20,000 years. We trust in Shrek Academy, and I hope my son can make it into the academy. The reporter asked, what if your son doesn't make it? Will you consider Spirit Academy then? The middle-aged man faltered slightly before replying. Perhaps. The reporter continued. Spirit Academy is offering some very alluring benefits, including the prioritized provision of soul spirits and chances to access the Spirit Ascension Plane and Myriad Beast Plane. These are all beyond what Shrek Academy can offer. It seems that you must be quite well off to persist with Shrek Academy despite all this. The middle-aged man's brows furrowed slightly as he replied, investment is required when nurturing a child. Having said that, Spirit Academy's resources really are more plentiful. The reporter said, indeed, with the tension between these two academies, I wonder if your child will have issues securing soul spirits from the Spirit Pagoda in the future if he chooses to study at Shrek Academy. The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. Surely not. The reporter shrugged in response. I'm not sure, either, but it seems that the relationship between the Spirit Pagoda and Shrek Academy really is quite strained. All right, I have to interview some other people now. I wish you the best of luck. Many similar interviews were taking place in front of Shrek Academy, and almost all of the reporters had a clear bias towards Spirit Academy. Soon, people's resolve began to sway, and some of them began to make their way toward the Spirit Academy buses. In response to this, Shrek Academy displayed no reaction and continued proceedings as normal. According to our estimates, there are currently around twice as many people applying for Spirit Academy than for Shrek Academy. It seems that the resources being offered by the Spirit Pagoda have attracted a lot of people. We really want to know what Shrek Academy thinks of this, but they've refused all interviews, stating that they would like to focus wholeheartedly on enrollment procedures. Look, everyone. Right at this moment, a deafening burst of buzzing rang out from Spirit Academy, and over 300 mechas rose up into the air above the academy. These mechas were all of different grades, and they were led by 3 extremely eye-catching red divine grade mechas. The 3 red mechas were flying in the air in a triangular formation, holding identical giant banners to the ones set up in front of Shrek Academy. The 300 mechas presented a very stunning sight to behold, and they were occasionally performing some aerobatic tricks as part of a show of power from Spirit Academy. Through its actions, the Spirit Pagoda was targeting Shrek Academy in the most straightforward way, rather than resorting to any sneaky tricks. Chapter 1597. Throughout the past 20,000 years, almost all of the most exceptional young soul masters on the continent would try to apply for Shrek Academy, and as a result, all other high-grade academies habitually set their enrollment dates later than Shrek Academies. The students that they would be receiving would be the ones rejected by Shrek Academy. However, the Spirit Pagoda had broken this convention on this occasion, and with its absolute advantage in the resources department, it was confident that it would crush Shrek Academy in this enrollment battle. Even if Spirit Academy couldn't take all of the students, it would count as their victory if they could take over half of the most exceptional students. They were confident that with the resources provided by the Spirit Pagoda, these students would definitely develop to be no less exceptional than the students of Shrek Academy. They were determined to take the title of the #1 academy on the continent, and once they managed to secure that title, it wouldn't even matter if Shrek Academy continued to exist, as it would only be an empty shell of its former self. Kaiyanki Dongfang had devised this plan in order to not give Shrek Academy any chances. In contrast with Shrek Academy's subdued display, Spirit Academy was like a peacock flaunting its canopy. The paths leading into the academy were lined with countless bouquets of flowers, and there were many people attending to the young applicants and their parents. Almost half of the employees at the Spirit Pagoda headquarters had been sent to Spirit Academy, and even Kaiyanki Dongfang was going to be present in the academy until the commencement of the opening ceremony. The 300 mechas soaring over Spirit Academy were drawing gasps of awe and admiration from the crowd, particularly the 3 red mechas. All of them were radiating dazzling light, and even though they were smaller than the mechas of other colors, everyone knew just how powerful divine grade mechas were. Even though divine grade mechas couldn't compare with 4-word battle armor, a mecha pilot would have to at least be a titled Douluo if they wanted to unleash the full power of a divine grade mecha. How could such a stunning display of power and wealth not attract widespread attention? These 3 divine grade mechas didn't actually belong to the Spirit Pagoda. Instead, they were the best mechas that the Mecha Pilot Association had to offer. The Mecha Pilot Association was looking to collaborate with the Spirit Pagoda through Spirit Academy. If the association could establish strong ties with Spirit Academy's mecha division, then there would be more and more exceptional young mecha pilots joining their association after graduating from the academy, and that would certainly be a very desirable outcome. Aside from the mecha pilots, there were also soul masters flying through the air, releasing their martial soul true bodies or displaying their powerful martial souls and soul spirits. It was as if a festival were taking place outside Spirit Academy. All of this had been painstakingly planned and prepared, and the Spirit Pagoda had expended this much effort to ensure that it could strike down Shrek Academy once and for all. It was clear that they were targeting Shrek Academy, but everything was being done fair and square, so no criticism could be directed toward the Spirit Pagoda. As the first principal of Spirit Academy, Kaiyanki's Hainting was overseeing the proceedings in person. A long line had already formed outside Spirit Academy, but the enrollment hadn't officially begun. In 10 minutes, Spirit Academy was going to be extending a direct challenge toward Shrek Academy. Kaiyanki's Hainting's heart was filled with excitement, but also a hint of anxiety. This was the first opportunity anyone had had in 20,000 years to truly surpass Shrek Academy, and this was an extremely important event for the Kaiyanki family, as well as his lifelong dream. As the principal of Spirit Academy, he was standing at the very forefront of all of this, and if he was successful, his position in the Spirit Pagoda would definitely be elevated to a whole new level. At the very least, it would make up for the loss he suffered to Tang Wulin. So what if Tang Wulin was individually powerful? This was a world in which resources were integral. A resentful look appeared in Kaiyanki's Hainting's eyes at the mere thought of Tang Wulin. He wanted nothing better than to tear Tang Wulin to shreds with his bare hands. Is everything ready? Kaiyanki's Hainting asked. An employee immediately replied, rest assured, principal, everything is ready, and we've set up a total of 50 registration desks. After registration, everyone will immediately be taken to undergo examinations, and lodging will be provided in the academy for those who pass. Spirit Academy was covering all bases with registration, examination, enrollment, and boarding, giving students no chance to leave. To put it in simpler terms, no student would be allowed to leave, particularly not to defect to the enemy on the other side. Good. Prepare for the countdown. Kaiyanki's Hainting said as he glanced at the time on his soul communicator with a cold light in his narrowed eyes. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a very, very long time. It had to be said that everything the Spirit Pagoda was doing was proving to be very effective. The performance they were putting on and the biased reporters they had sent to Shrek Academy were convincing more and more people to enroll at their academy, and it was clear that there were more students enrolling at Spirit Academy than at Shrek Academy. The clash between the two Academies was about to begin. What everyone failed to notice was that there were a few unremarkable figures making their way into Spirit Academy's registration area. Everywhere they went, the dense crowd would naturally part for them without even realizing it, and they soon arrived at the very front of the registration area. There were around a dozen of them in total, and they stopped as soon as they arrived at the main gate of Spirit Academy. They then quickly pulled two long rods out of a storage cell tool, then suspended a banner high up in the air. The banner read, "Preliminary examination." One of the young men glanced at the time, then said to the parent of the child that was first in line, "Hi there, prior to registration, your child must undergo a preliminary examination. Please bring him over here." "No problem." The parent immediately did as he was told. Another chubby young man said to the small child, "Give me your hand." The young boy appeared to be around 11 or 12 years of age, and he extended a hand forward in a nervous manner. The chubby young man gently squeezed the pulse on his wrist, then said, "He's passed. You may enter for registration." "Thank you," the parent said in a grateful manner before departing with his child. Next. The next parent quickly brought their child over to the same young man. The preliminary examination was very quick, and it didn't seem all that difficult to pass, considering the first child had passed so easily. Sure enough, the next child was also promptly granted entry after having his pulse briefly felt. At this point, registration had already commenced, and there were designated employees leading the children and their parents in through the academy's main entrance. For some reason, all of them were struck by a sense of disorientation, but the registration process progressed very smoothly. However, none of the employees paid any heed to the group of people under the preliminary examination banner. Everything proceeded in an orderly fashion, and the parents had no reason to doubt that the preliminary examination had been organized by anyone other than Spirit Academy. After laying his hand onto the wrist of the 37th child in the line, the chubby young man's expression suddenly lit up. "You're a special case. You're a monster, so you have to register somewhere else." He pointed to the area beside the banner as he spoke, and a door that was rippling with rainbow light suddenly appeared there. The parent was rather perplexed. "What's the meaning of this? Why do we have to go somewhere else? My son is very exceptional. He's always been top of his class back where we came from." The chubby young man smiled and replied, "That's exactly why we're giving him special treatment. Go on now. Don't delay everyone else." "All right, but what is this door?" Chapter 1598. The parent led the child over to the door of light with a confused expression, and the door seemed to be releasing some type of profound force of attraction, edging him to step into it almost in an involuntary manner. As soon as they strayed into the door, they immediately disappeared, and the young man explained, "Those who we deem to be especially talented must go through that door to a special registration area. That place is similar to our Spirit Pagoda's Myriad Beast Plane, so there's no need to be concerned. All right, next." Thus, everything continued to move along. The reporters were naturally able to see what was happening, but they also thought that this had been organized by the Spirit Pagoda. After all, none of the employees from the Spirit Pagoda were saying anything. Registration was also underway for Shrek Academy, and even though the benefits offered by Spirit Academy were very alluring, Shrek Academy was still the legendary #1 academy on the continent, and many parents, especially those who were Shrek Academy alumni themselves, were still full of reverence for this sacred institution. Even though Shrek Academy had been destroyed, not a single student had perished despite the Godslayer missiles that had been unleashed. How could one not trust an academy like this? As such, even though there were less registrants at Shrek Academy, the overall quality was still higher than the registrants at Spirit Academy. Spirit Academy was doing its best to sway people over to their side, but their efforts weren't bearing much fruit. In Spirit Academy, Principal, our sources tell us that there are still a lot of registrants at Shrek Academy, and our scouts say that they've seen at least 4 registrants with soul power in excess of rank 20. Kyangyu's Hangting's brows immediately furrowed upon hearing this. Are these people idiots? What's so good about Shrek Academy? They won't even get soul spirits in the future. The employee didn't respond. In reality, everyone knew that the reputation Shrek Academy had forged itself over the span of 20,000 years couldn't be erased in a short time. No matter what Spirit Academy did, it was unrealistic to expect everyone to turn on Shrek Academy. Should we take some other measures? The employee asked in a low voice. A cold light flashed through Kyangyu's Hangting's eyes as he instructed. "Send them out. Let's see how Shrek Academy deals with them. They want to collaborate with us, so they'll have to put in some work. Keep a close eye on the situation. Make sure to constantly cause problems for Shrek Academy." "Yes." Shortly thereafter, a group of around a dozen mechas suddenly detached itself from the rest of the 300 mechas and flew toward Shrek Academy. A voice then rang out across the entirety of Shrek Academy through the use of a voice amplifier. "I heard that Shrek Academy's enrollment day is today, and that you also have a mecha department. Are there any divine grade mecha pilots among your ranks? I am divine grade mecha pilot Nente, the vice principal of Spirit Academy's mecha division, and I've come to pay your academy a visit." A red mecha shot forth through the air as the voice rang out, and it reached Shrek Academy like a bolt of rapid red lightning, performing a few highly difficult aerobatic tricks during its flight. Under the radiance of the sun, the red mecha looked as if it had sprung to life, and it was giving off an extremely overbearing aura. All of the registrants down below looked up in unison, and right at this moment, a vast expanse of purplish blue light suddenly appeared right above Shrek Academy's main school building. The purplish blue light had appeared very abruptly, and it was like a massive net. The red mecha was tangled up in the net of light, and a string of cracks and pops rang out, following which the once majestic red mecha suddenly plummeted into Shrek Academy with sparks flashing all over its surface. It was as if the red mecha were a fly that had just been struck by an electric fly swatter. An authoritative voice then rang out from within Shrek Academy. "The airspace of Shrek Academy is not to be encroached upon." The other mechas were speeding towards Shrek Academy in an overbearing manner, and all of them immediately halted in midair, while the mecha pilots were all stunned by what they had just seen. That was a divine grade mecha. How had it suddenly been struck down? Surely even a limit Douluo wouldn't be able to strike down a divine grade mecha in an instant. What had just happened? How dare you, Shrek Academy? An enraged voice rang out from another red mecha. "Release Nente at once." The rest of the 300 mechas immediately flew toward Shrek Academy in a menacing fashion in the wake of this sudden turn of events. Shrek Academy had made a resounding statement by striking down a red mecha so easily. Who would dare to approach the academy after seeing that? If a yellow or purple mecha had been in the red mecha's place, wouldn't it have completely exploded? As such, not even a single mecha dared to approach Shrek Academy's main school building, and all of the prospective students and their parents were left completely dumbstruck. That was so badass. They had also been concerned that the rebuilt Shrek Academy wouldn't be as powerful as it once was, but it seemed that this preconceived notion may be incorrect. That was a divine grade mecha. On the battlefield, a divine grade mecha could transform the complexion of an entire battle on its own. However, such an almighty mecha had been instantly struck down without being able to offer any resistance. What type of attack could have achieved something like this? One had to realize that that net of purplish blue light had encompassed quite a large area. With such incredible defenses, Shrek Academy was surely going to be an impregnable fortress. This was a product of the Tang Sect's technological prowess. Zhang Xin had once told Tang Wuling that the Tang Sect had recently just completed development on a super solar ray defense system, and this system was the product of countless generations of effort and research. The system had initially been designed with the intended purpose of being used on spaceships for space exploration, not for the Tang Sect or Shrek Academy. No one knew what outer space was like, so it was imperative to have a powerful defense system. As such, this defense system was meant to be used on the Federation's aircraft carriers as an initial experiment, but after the destruction of Shrek City, all of those plans naturally changed. In the wake of such a horrific incident, the Tang Sect naturally wasn't going to offer such an important piece of technology to the Federation. Chapter 1599. Thus, Zhang Xin had told Tang Wuling that this system was going to be reserved for Shrek Academy and the entire Sea God's Lake. Once it was complete, even Godslayer missiles wouldn't pose a threat anymore. Such a massive project couldn't be completed anytime soon, but the prototype that the Tang Sector developed was ready to be used, so it was installed around the 3 main school buildings to ensure the safety of that area. It could be said that the red mecha just now was the first test subject to face the wrath of the defense system, and as it turned out, the defense system was just as powerful as Zhang Xin had proclaimed. Whoosh! Right at this moment, an object flew out of Shrek Academy, arcing through the air in a rough parabolic trajectory before landing outside the academy. This was a humanoid figure that was desperately trying to stabilize itself in midair, but seemed to be unable to do so. In the end, it landed face first right in front of all of the mechas amid a dull thump. This was a middle-aged man who appeared to be in his 40s or 50s, and he had fallen to the ground in a spread-eagle fashion. He was completely nude aside from a pair of underpants, and the mechas had all quickly dispersed, thinking that this was some type of offensive projectile. As such, the area in a radius of 100 meters around him was completely empty, putting his near nudity on full display. The atmosphere instantly congealed, and the high-grade mecha pilots at the very front were able to instantly recognize that this sorry-looking figure was none other than the vastly renowned divine grade mecha pilot, Nente. Aside from his role at Spirit Academy, he was also once the premier mecha pilot of the Sea God Legion, an honorary chairman of the Mecha Pilot Association, and was widely regarded as the most exceptional mecha pilot of the past century. He had invented 8 different mecha maneuvers, and it was no exaggeration to say that he was a legend in the world of mecha pilots. However, this legend had just been hurled out of Shrek Academy in only his underwear like a dirty trash bag. Meng Tai's status among mecha pilots was equivalent to Mu Chen's status among blacksmiths, and he had accepted the invitation of Spirit Academy as he had received financial support from the Spirit Pagoda during the earlier days of his cultivation. As such, he had maintained very close ties with the Spirit Pagoda, and he naturally wasn't going to be absent on such an important occasion. As one of the Mecha Division's 3 divine grade mecha pilots, he was a very powerful man, yet he had been completely and utterly humiliated. However, even some of the people from Spirit Academy were struck by the urge to laugh. Meng Tai was a very conceited man who didn't have many friends, and was always very condescending to those around him. As such, even the other mecha teachers of Spirit Academy didn't have a good impression of him. However, no one dared to oppose him due to his power and status. It was this very same arrogant figure who had just been thrown out of Shrek Academy in his underwear, and for those who couldn't stand his cocky demeanor, they were somewhat satisfied by his sorry display. However, it was still very much worthy of alarm that a divine grade mecha pilot was struck down and thrown out of Shrek Academy within the span of a minute. Furthermore, no one had even emerged from Shrek Academy to address the situation. Their enrollment continued as if they hadn't even seen the 300 mechas, but none of the mechas dared to approach the academy. Was Shrek Academy still this powerful? Meng Tai's body was trembling as he struggled to his feet, and blood was flowing out of his nostrils. His face was completely flushed red, but it was from fury rather than from any physical injuries. The more arrogant a person was, the more they cared about their reputation, yet he had just been thrown out in his underwear in front of so many people, and he had even lost his divine grade mecha. How could he bear such humiliation? He could still recall that his mecha had suddenly malfunctioned, following which a powerful electric current had struck his body, and his mecha then plummeted out of the sky. Divine grade mechas were able to protect their pilots exceptionally well, so he wasn't injured, but as soon as he landed, his mecha was opened from the outside. Divine grade mechas had immense defensive prowess, and unless their pilot opened them from the inside, there should have been no way for such mechas to be opened from the outside. At the time, Meng Tai was still paralyzed from the electric shock, and a thought had suddenly occurred to him. This divine grade mecha had been constructed for him by the Tang sect, so only people from the Tang sect would have been able to open it from the outside. After that, he was wrenched out of the mecha by a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't say anything. He merely stripped Meng Tai of all of his mecha pilot equipment and clothes, then threw him out of the academy like a piece of garbage. This was unforgivable. Meng Tai was a titled Douluo and a divine grade mecha pilot. Even in the almighty Spirit Pagoda, he was treated as an esteemed guest. When had he ever been humiliated like this before? Meng Tai felt as if his blood were about to boil over and spill out of his own body. He had recovered from his paralysis and was able to draw upon his soul power again, and he immediately released his 9 soul rings before rushing directly toward Shrek Academy without paying any heed to his current appearance. None of the other mechas followed him in his maddened charge. It was one thing to provoke Shrek Academy, but directly attacking the academy was a major federal crime. All academies and schools were places of education to nurture the younger generation, so attacking any school was strictly prohibited by law and also heavily frowned upon. As such, Meng Tai had only planned to issue a challenge to Shrek Academy. Issuing a challenge wasn't a direct attack, and he was confident that Shrek Academy didn't have any divine grade mechas, so he was merely trying to embarrass them. However, he was now blinded by his own fury, and all he wanted to do was to destroy the academy to avenge himself. In contrast, the other mecha pilots were far more level-headed, and they knew that all of them would be in massive trouble if they were to attack Shrek Academy with Meng Tai. Thus, Meng Tai was the only one charging towards Shrek Academy. There was a long line of students and parents gathered in front of the academy, and they immediately began to panic at the sight of the enraged titled Douluo. Chapter 1600. Right at this moment, a figure emerged from within the academy. Her stunning beauty and short fiery red hair were both very eye-catching, and despite her slender figure, she gave off a mountainous aura. She looked to be in her early 20s, and she was wearing the most ordinary dark green Shrek Academy uniform, creating an interesting contrast with her red hair. She wasn't walking very quickly, but it only took her a few steps to pass through the crowd and face off against the man Meng Tai. Meng Tai's martial soul was air control, and this was a very rare martial soul that was technically a mutation of wind elemental control. As a result, he had very accurate control over air, and that had helped him become a divine grade mecha pilot. At this moment, all of the air around him was warping violently, and at the sight of the slender approaching figure, he lashed out without any hesitation. The air instantly compressed, and a massive white palm formed by compressed air instantly reached the red-haired young woman. The palm was over 2 meters tall, and a string of alarmed cries immediately rang out. This was an attack from an enraged titled Douluo. Could that young woman really withstand it? It would be a real pity for beauty like her were to die here. Even some of the mecha pilots in the distance had turned away, unable to bear watching any longer. Furthermore, if Meng Tai were to kill someone in front of Shrek Academy, this conflict would be immediately escalated to a whole new level, and that wouldn't benefit Spirit Academy at all. Competition was competition, but murdering was something else entirely. Right at this moment, the young woman sprang into action. Her expression remained unchanged in the face of Meng Tai's devastating palm, and she merely extended a pristine white fist in an unhurried manner. Her movements seemed to be very casual and harmless, but it was as if heaven and earth had congealed around her fist. The surrounding air suddenly began to revolve, and ripples began to appear over the surface of Meng Tai's giant palm. Those ripples quickly dispersed, and the extremely compressed air seemed to be on the verge of falling apart. Boom! In the next instant, a resounding boom rang out, causing the entire space to tremor violently, and the surrounding air erupted into the heavens like a tornado. Meng Tai was struck by a sense of asphyxiation, and his body was instantly enveloped within a burst of invisible rotational force. It was as if the surrounding air shackled him, rendering him completely immobilized. His forte lay in his ability to control air, but for some reason, it was as if the air had suddenly turned against him. The earth had become impossibly heavy, forcing him to plummet to the ground, following which the red-haired young woman stepped forward once again before slamming her pristine white palm directly toward his head. From the instant that the giant palm was nullified to the moment that the young woman reached Meng Tai, only around a second or two had passed. Stop! 2 loud cries rang out in unison from the other 2 divine grade mechas. They had returned to their senses right as Meng Tai was charging towards Shrek Academy, and they immediately realized what severe consequences would be incurred if Meng Tai were to kill someone in front of Shrek Academy. Even though they weren't exactly on friendly terms with Meng Tai, they couldn't just watch him commit such an atrocious act. Thus, the 2 mechas shot forth in a flash, streaking through the air like 2 bolts of red lightning. The divine grade mechas were extraordinarily fast, and they managed to make it to Meng Tai's side a split second before the young woman could reach him. The red mecha on the right raised its right arm to send a flurry of wind blades surging toward the young woman while also releasing a powerful repulsive energy barrier. The young woman's expression changed slightly, and she instantly stopped before allowing herself to be sent flying by the energy barrier, then landed several dozens of meters away. Calm down, brother Meng Tai. The other divine grade mecha had already grabbed onto Meng Tai to hold him into place. The 2 divine grade mechas were completely different in design. The one on the right was a humanoid one with crescent blades on its arms, and it was extremely fast, clearly designed to be adept in melee combat. In contrast, the other divine grade mecha resembled a huge bird and also possessed some properties of fighter aircrafts. It was also very fast, and there were many missile barrels on its surface, hinting at its enormous destructive capabilities. Humph. The red-haired young woman harumphed coldly as she adopted a horse stance, and as she did so, the gravity in a radius of hundreds of meters spiked drastically, giving both divine grade mecha pilots quite a fright. Who was this young woman? She seemed to be even more powerful than the average titled Douluo. Before they had a chance to say anything, the young woman's body suddenly began to expand, and in the blink of an eye, she had transformed from a stunning young woman into a giant ape that was over 10 meters tall. The giant ape was entirely black in color, and a burst of terrifying battle intent erupted from its body. A gauntlet appeared on the massive ape's right arm, and the gauntlet was reflecting extremely dazzling light, as if it had been carved out of diamond. The gauntlet covered the giant ape's entire right arm, and it was so radiant that it was almost too bright to look at. The huge ape took a deep breath, and its body expanded even further. The ape then got even deeper into its horse stance, then thrust its right fist toward the 2 divine grade mechas in a very slow manner. Despite how slow her movements were, everyone's expression changed drastically as soon as she unleashed this punch. This was because the weather had suddenly changed. The sky had been completely bright and devoid of clouds just a moment ago, yet all of a sudden, it had become very dim. Clouds had suddenly begun to converge up above before surging downward, forming a massive rotating vortex that engulfed the giant ape's entire body. All of a sudden, the surrounding air became very humid, and fearsome rotational air currents encompassed all of the mechas up ahead, not just the 2 divine grade mechas. What kind of power was required to change the weather through a single attack? Who was this woman? The defenses of the 2 divine grade mechas were instantly activated to the maximal extent, and in the next instant, both of them were struck by a burst of astonishing force. Boom. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.